It's December the 11th, 2018. We're doing our Tuesday night tube guitar amplifier webinar session. And the first item on the agenda tonight has to do with an organ amp. And I'm going to read you a little bit about it. It says, attached is the original schematic and layout for the Hammond AO63 that was used in the E100 organ. This is basically the amplifiers for both the Reverb Circuit, which is a totally separate preamp push-pull section with a 7247 preamp. You know, he's pointing out that tube it crosses with a DW7, 12 DW7, which is half 12AX7, half 12AU7, and an ECL 86, which crosses with a 6GW8 phase inverter, and push-pull output tubes and its own rectifier, an EZ81. According to the schematic and design, the reverb output connects to its own 8-inch speaker within the Hammond organ cabinet. Now, I've seen this on not only the Hammonds, but even the Leslies. They would have a separate amplifier for the reverb. And by the way, Hammond is who invented the reverb. Lauren Hammonds invented the spring reverb. And he had the patent on it. In fact, the original ones had these huge springs. I mean, some of those old Hammond tone cabinets made in the 40s and 50s, they have those long springs. I always thought it'd be cool to take some of those springs out and make a reverb and use those organ springs because they're huge.
I was going to say, weren't they hanging kind of loosely?
Yeah, they were hanging. They were vertical.
Yeah.
It was a big thing. I think it's probably 3.5 feet tall. Big old metal piece, you know, with some springs. But anyway, the power amp section for the dry signal uses a 7591 push-pull output stage. Now, 7591 is, think of it as being the same type of impedances as a 6V6, but it can take more power like a 6L6. And the power is a little bit more than the 6V and a little less. It's kind of in between the 6V and the 6L. And these were used in a lot of Ampeg amps. They used 7591. Anyway, and moving onward, 12AX7 and 7247s in the preamp and phase inverter, 5AR4 rectifier tube, and circuitry to split the low and high output signals split between a 15 and a 10-inch main speaker. Now, this is the same way Leslie did it. They would have a mono amp and it would go to a crossover, and the crossover would split them into different speakers. There is a preamp tone control companion chassis, the AO69, which I do not own, and it's not needed for the conversion to a guitar amp, as there are plenty of 9-pin sockets available and plenty of room on the chassis to install more sockets if needed. Included is a schematic of an Ampeg Gemini conversion. Oh, okay. And I think the Gemini used the 7591. With added tube tremolo circuit and the reverb rewired to merge with the dry signal, thus eliminating the separate reverb push-pull output section, similar to the way Fender merges the reverb with the dry signal. I was curious what a separate reverb output section with its own driver would sound like in a guitar amp. I realize it's a waste of resources and space. I may experiment just to hear what it sounds like. Feeding an 8 or 10-inch speaker and 10-inch or 12-inch for the main output will probably wind up merging the signal, but the circuit's already built, so it wouldn't be difficult to try out. I can give you another suggestion here. Get an amp that's got reverb, say a Blackface Fender, something like that, a Super Reverb, Twin Reverb, Pro Reverb, something like that, or any other amp really that has a spring reverb, and where the reverb goes back in to the return on the amp, unplug that, and put an adapter on the end with a 1/4 inch and plug it into another amp.
Oh, that's right. That would be the same thing, wouldn't it? Yep.
Yeah, and that would be, and matter of fact, that might be a really cool thing to do on stage. You know, if you had a multi-amp setup, just have a separate amp for your reverb. Maybe even put it, you know, like on the other side of the stage or something.
I had the guitar player I worked with years ago. He used to use 2 amps, one strictly for his effects and one for dry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's cool.
Made it sound really large and like big, you know.
Well, you know, when I was using a multi-amp setup back in the 90s, I was using a 3-amp setup, but one of the amps, I had the signal from my ABC box going to the 3rd amp, but instead of going straight to the amp, it went to an Echoplex, and the Echoplex was set for full wet, no dry signal whatsoever, and it had a foot switch to turn it off and on. And I would put that amp on the other side of the stage, and on certain songs, usually on slow ballads or something real pretty and soft and clean, I would switch that Echoplex on, and it would ping pong. You know, you'd hear the original signal on one side of the stage out of 2 amps, and then you'd hear the echo, you know, on the other side. So it worked really well for, you know, slow songs. Anyway, I digress. Let's go continue here. I also want to use 7199s as the phase inverter and an EF86 pentode in the first position. And depending on what this sounds like, may leave it or may make it into a high gain switchable option, so the amp will wind up being the best of vintage Ampeg Gibson with the EF86, like a Vox, Matchless, or a Dr. Z. Still in design, experimental stage. Okay. Let's see, is there anything else that that I'm missing here, Chris? Help me.
No, that's basically it in a nutshell.
Okay.
You know, and one of the reasons why I wanted to experiment with keeping that reverb channel possibly separate is because the more stuff you merge in, you know, with the different effects, I think you lose something when you have too many mergers of different signal paths. I like to keep the signal path as clean as possible all the way through.
Yeah.
But again, it is a waste of resource, and I'll do what you suggested to see what it sounds like before I go through the trouble.
Well, I'm with the same camp you are. You know, less circuitry is better. The less crap that the signal goes through, you know, the more you're going to hear the tube and the less you're going to hear the circuit. So,
Right.
So yeah, I'm from that school too, and I try to keep things minimal. Sometimes when you merge stuff, you know, you got to put some bunch of series resistance in there, and that kills your high-end definition. And then you try to compensate for it with a cap, and you know, I don't know. I think if you can make it pure without a whole bunch of stuff, you're going to be happier. And that was Trainwreck's philosophy too. You know,
Yes.
less is more. That was his whole design thing. And if you look at his amp circuits, there's nothing to them. It's just what it takes to make those tubes work. Very little, you know. In fact, he doesn't have anything with any kind of merging or reverb or anything like that. The only thing he ever designed with the reverb is that one that we designed together, the Climax. But
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's go through this. What am I looking at first? You want to look at the power amp? You want to look at the Gemini?
Yeah, we could look at the main, you know, how it is built as is. So that's the main power amp. That's everything that's there.
Okay.
The reverb power amp.
So this is what you got to work with here. You got a chassis, and it's got can caps. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 can caps on the thing. You got plenty of preamp tube sockets here. Four there, and then you got this for your reverb.
Yeah, I mean, that reverb transformer is big enough it's bigger than a deluxe reverb transformer, believe it or not.
Did you draw this, Chris?
No, I didn't. I'd love to take credit, but I'm not that good.
It looks good. Okay, so this is what you've got now. And then, okay, this is your reverb circuit.
So this is the modified reverb circuit.
And what's modified about it?
Well, this is built for guitar. You see, this next set of schematics is the Ampeg build.
Okay.
So
let's go back and look at the reverb here. Now the reverb here, your signal's coming in, and some of it's going through the amp, some of it's going through the reverb over here. Let me get my pointer, spotlight or something here. So this is your reverb circuit. They're using a big cathode resistor here, and I suspect that this organ signal is going to be pretty hot. I don't know exactly how hot, but I would think they would have a pretty strong signal coming through there.
Very wide frequency, obviously, from an organ.
Yeah.
So the caps are going to be a bit bigger than we're used to here.
Yeah, this is a lot bigger. This 100, when you figure the size of this and the size of this, I haven't done the math, but just guessing, that probably gets you down to about probably 8 hertz or something. Maybe, yeah, maybe even less, maybe 6 hertz. I mean, it's a huge setup because, see, 100 is usually a guitar uses a 25. That's 4 times the size. And then when you make your cathode resistor bigger, it makes the cap have more effect because the capacitive reactance of this cap as compared to a bigger one is going to be less. So that's going to make the frequency response go, real low. I mean, you could go all real low. And then what are they doing here? They're using a 7247, and that's the 12AX7 side, isn't it? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, because they want preamp, they want voltage gain here. But then it's going back over to the 12AU side because it's not so much the voltage they want there, they want the current. And this draws a lot of current, and they can run that current through this and probably get about 2 watts, 2-3 watts. Does anybody know what a 12AU7, what the plate watt dissipation is on it off the top of your head? It's about at least 2.5 watts.
It's pretty close to a 12AT7.
Well, a 12AT7 is 2.5 watts.
Okay.
So it's probably 2.5. It might even be 3, but it's enough to drive this reverb pan. And here's your pan here that it's driving. And then the return of the pan.
2.75 watts.
2.75. Yeah. See, the 12AT's 2.5, so just a little bit more. So it's driving this pan. And what do we have here? They're trying to show that it's shielded. That's what that ground is. That's not really ground. So they've got the.
I wonder why they've got a number 15 lamp going there to ground.
That's an indicator. It it kind of flashes when the reverb is on.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's an indicator, huh?
Has some effect on the circuit too.
What kind of lamp is it, Chris? Because it's.
Take a look at it. I'm pretty sure it's incandescent.
Yeah, it is.
Man, I don't know, because look, where's it being driven from? It's being driven from this input here. That's high impedance there, man. And it's got a 470K going to it. That looks
like feedback to me of some kind.